Like many Central Florida communities, Seminole County is currently relying on flood maps from the Federal Emergency Management Agency that are almost 20 years old and don't fully account for all the flooding factors like stormwater infrastructure, climate change, and development. For Central Florida Public Media's special series, Central Florida Seen and Heard Rising Water, this week reporters Molly Durig and Lillian Hernandez Carbajo explore why official FEMA flood maps don't show the full scope of flooding risk and how people in Seminole County are navigating the uncertainty.
Today is business as usual at the Breezeway Restaurant in Historic Downtown Sanford.
Hi, welcome to Breezeway.
But General Manager Louis Quiñones remembers one day in 2021 when water came rushing into the restaurant's courtyard where people were dining.
That one was really, really weird because that one actually wasn't a hurricane. That was just a normal storm.
The video shows patrons trying to avoid the water, lifting their feet up on tables, mostly laughing it off.
We're just hanging out. But that's what Sanford is. We're a very, very fun town.
But next year, Hurricanes Ian and Nicole hit before an unnamed tropical storm, which Quiñones says caused the most damage. After that, it wasn't so funny anymore.
This is a very old building, so things like that do affect us big because when you have deterioration, when you have the flood coming through, we're losing equipment, we're losing furniture. There's a lot to it.
Leaving staff at the Breezeway concerned about the future of their historic building and their business. The Breezeway is about a third of a mile south of Lake Monroe, which was flooded for months after Hurricane Ian hit. And yet, FEMA flood maps don't place the restaurant in a designated flood zone. Molly found out this isn't uncommon in the downtown Sanford area.
Actually, according to Seminole County's Stormwater Master Plan, most of the Sanford Basin is not in the 100-year floodplain. Breaking that down, a drainage basin is an area that collects, stores, and transports water. A 100-year floodplain is where flood risk is highest. We drove to Seminole County's Public Works office to meet with project manager Jeff Sloman. He told us the term 100-year flood is often misunderstood.
What's called a 100-year flood is defined as a storm event that statistically has a 1% chance of occurring every year. It's not a storm that occurs every 100 years.
Sloman says in reality, those kinds of storms are happening more often, including here in Seminole. Since 2011, total rainfall in the county has gone up by nearly 150%. The last time FEMA updated Seminole County's flood map was almost 20 years ago. And Sloman says the 100-year floodplain looks a lot bigger now than it did back then, meaning those high-risk flood zones on the maps should be covering a lot more area. To fix this, Sloman says for the first time, Seminole County is running new studies on almost all of its water basins at once. Basin studies evaluate how much water flows to a certain point, usually a water body like Lake Monroe, before flooding happens.
FEMA actually does the actual revision of the floodplain, but it's all based on documentation that the county provides to them.
So what's the problem with updating the maps? Well, Sloman says after all the local funding, manpower, and resources for the basin studies, then it goes to FEMA.
It is a very long process with FEMA. It takes probably over a year from your initial submittal till the maps are actually issued.
Like many parts of Central Florida, Seminole's developed a lot since 2007 when the last flood maps were made. As we lay down more cement, the water has fewer places to go. That's something Lily can tell us all about. She's been doing research on the impacts of development on water flow.
And I found it's not just development. There's also the compounding factor of rising water levels and stronger storms from climate change.
Not to use a metaphor that might be particularly apt for Florida, but it does seem like there's almost a perfect storm of pressures going on here.
That's Environmental Protection Agency Deputy Administrator Janet McCabe. We met her earlier this spring when McCabe visited Central Florida. McCabe says it's time to stop living in the past and address the country's current and future water management challenges.
Things are enshrined in policy and regulation and in people's brains. Well, this is how we do it, and this is what the maps are, so just use those maps. But those maps are not going to help us plan 5-10 years and longer down the road. We need to be able to use the best science and the best predictions.
There's actually some talk of changing FEMA's current flood mapping strategies altogether. Right now, flood maps are more of a snapshot in time, designed to show the highest risk areas for flood insurance. That's key. Think of FEMA flood maps as flood insurance rate maps, or FIRMs. Flood insurance is required for buildings in the most flood-prone areas, but in reality, government officials told us they recommend it for pretty much everyone in Florida. That's what Sanford's Public Works Manager Mike Cash told Molly.
If you're not in the floodplain and you think there's any chance in the world that your house might flood, you better carry flood insurance.
That's why 7 years ago, Cash says he got the city of Sanford involved with FEMA's Community Rating System, or CRS, a voluntary system that scores local governments based on what they do to reduce flood risk. In exchange, community members enjoy a discount on flood insurance. That's not a bad idea. Florida has one of the highest flood insurance rates in the nation. According to FEMA, flood insurance can range anywhere from about $500 to nearly $2,500 a year.
Lake Monroe is the main discharge point for everything downtown.
Water from 3 different basins flows into Lake Monroe. But some of Sanford's stormwater pipes are more than 100 years old, and the city's rapid growth is overwhelming them. So Cash says the city's building out a whole new 4th drainage basin to help ease the load.
It's a significant project, and we expect it to do a lot of good.
Hopefully, this project will help businesses in downtown Sanford, like the Breezeway. But Cash says clear-cut solutions are hard to come by because flooding is hard to predict.
It doesn't follow the rules, let's put it that way.
Making the search for adaptable, comprehensive solutions just not that easy.
Speaking of the Breezeway, downtown Sanford's iconic comfort spot is home to many.
I love this place. I honestly do. Mainly because everyone that seems to come here, it's almost like we're all family. Hey, Cindy. There you see what I mean? Everybody here knows everybody.
While updating flood maps costs local governments time and money, ultimately, community members and businesses don't have time to wait.
If we shut down, that's one thing I try not to think about. Let's hope it never comes to that.
For now, they're making the best of a bad situation they barely understand. But Quiñones says they're ready.
We have prepared, actually. So basically what's going to happen, we're going to have a hurricane party. We're going to hang out. We're going to drink, and we're going to get through, just like all the other years.
That's certainly one way to do it. Liliana Hernandez Caraballo
And Molly Durig, Central Florida Public Media.
Lillian Hernandez Caravaggio is a Report for America Corps member.